Chapter 9, Part 1. It might easily have been a prison, began Finn. It had towers and a moat and battlements, and it stood in acres of land ringed by a high stone wall full of spikes. But it wasn't. Westwood was a large country house, a stately home, which had belonged to the Taverners since the time of the Crusades. The head of the family was a stiff-necked, snooty landowner, Sir Aubrey Taverner, who brayed at people and spoke to the servants as if they were deaf. Sir Aubrey's eldest son was called Dudley, and he was exactly like his father, arrogant and snooty, and certain that the Taverners were the most important people on earth. Dudley, too, shouted at the servants. He went off to his prep school without a murmur. He rode horses with large behinds, he shot things, and of course, he was the apple of his father's eye. The next child born to the Taverners was a girl whom they called Joan. She wasn't much good in some ways, because only males were allowed to inherit Westwood, but all the same, she was a true Taverner with a voice like a foghorn. Joan bullied other children who had the bad luck not to be Taverners, and she too rode about on horses with large behinds, and Sir Aubrey liked her well enough. But then came Bernard. Bernard was the last of Sir Aubrey's children. His mother died very soon after he was born, and he was a disaster. Bernard was afraid of loud voices. He was afraid of the dark. He was afraid of his brother Dudley, who tried to make a man of him, and he was afraid of his sister Joan, who threw him in the lake and held his head under the water to make him swim. When Bernard spoke to the maids, he did it quietly, and he said please and thank you, and sometimes, though he was a boy and a Taverner, he cried. His father, of course, was desperate. A boy like Bernard had never happened in his family before. He sent him away to the toughest school he could find, but though the teachers caned him even more than his father had done, the boys did interesting things to him like squeezing lemon juice into his eyes and piercing the sole of his feet with compass needles. It seemed to make no difference. Bernard went on being quiet, and he went on being terrified of his family, and he went on saying please and thank you to the maids. But there were some things Bernard was not afraid of. He was not afraid of spiders. When the servants screamed because there was a large one in the bath, it was Bernard that they went to, and he would put a glass over it and let it out in the garden, admiring its fairy legs and complicated eyes. He was not afraid of the adders that hissed on the moor. He liked the adders with their zigzag markings and flickering tongues. Bernard did not mind the rats in the cellars. He did not mind the horses. He minded the people on the horses, his sister Joan with her braying voice and his brother Dudley with his whip. But if he met the horses quietly in the field, he got on well enough with them. It was one of the maids who showed him that there might be a way of escaping Westwood. She was an ugly, gawky girl, not much older than Bernard, and as much of a misfit among the servants as he was among his family. Bella was always dusting the books, but she was always reading them that she should have been dusting, and she was constantly in trouble. But she was the only friend that Bernard had. There were people who made their living with animals, she said. Naturalists, they're called. You could be one of them. From then on, my father knew what he wanted to do, said Finn. He wanted to get away from his family, as far as it was possible to go, and live with the animals. When you know what you want, you usually get it. It took Bernard 7 years, and all that time he said nothing to anyone, but he saved every penny he could. He saved his Christmas money, and he saved his pocket money. He never bought so much as a lollipop or a chocolate bar. And slowly, very slowly, his hoard built up. The maid who was his friend hid it from him in the cage of a stuffed owl in the attic, and all the time Dudley went on bullying him, and his father went on beating him, and his sister Joan went on jeering at him, but now Bernard had somewhere to go inside his head. Then a month after Bernard's 16th birthday, Sir Aubrey came down to breakfast, and so did Dudley, and so did Joan. They helped themselves to kedgeree and scrambled eggs and kidneys and bacon, and then Sir Aubrey rang for the footman to bring fresh coffee, and he said, "Where's Bernard? The wretched boy is late again." But Bernard wasn't late. He was gone, and nobody from Westwood ever set eyes on him again.